University for our delicious mac and cheese, and then Golden Home Health for the sponsorship.
Tonight we'll hear from clinicians, nonprofit leaders. The conversation will explore how research, innovation, and equity intersect, and what it will take to ensure every child, regardless of zip code and background, has access to the best possible care.
And as all of you know here in this room, federal funding is decreasing across all sectors. And tonight we're focusing our time on how we as a community can do more. How we must and can work together to raise our voices for all children with cancer. And we must fund innovative research and new ideas because we know that innovation and access saves lives and improves outcomes for all children.
For those of you that don't know our story, we started Madelyn James Pediatric Cancer Foundation because our daughter, Maddie Spell. At just 3 months old, she was diagnosed with a rare genetic form of leukemia. We have access to everything. Excellent health insurance, the ability to move our family, including Maddie's sister, from DC to CHOP, go Bears, and the most advanced therapies available. And still, Maddie did not survive. Modern medicine cannot cure the disease.
What we witnessed during treatment down the hospital was unacceptable, guys. We saw children left alone. Parents have to be forced between being next to their child and paying for a roof over their head. And that's why we're here today.
And we created Madelyn James to ensure that no matter the family's zip code, your resources, parents can stay together. You can stay by your baby's side. You can bring your families together while you're going to treat.
So we're honored to bring together some of our favorite people, both on the panel and in this room today. So we can talk about why we have to fund the latest innovations and equity to make sure that everyone can access these things. And you know, I know there's a lot of many of you in this audience who have had the lived experience with a child with cancer. And so we wanted to make this an approachable conversation and at the end allow you to ask questions and share your thoughts as well. Great. Well, we wanted to introduce our amazing panel tonight. So I will first begin with Dr. Who, in addition to being one of our amazing board members at Madelyn James, and Maddie's oncologist, we call Hannah, we kind of think of Sue as a grandma for her as well, which is truly amazing. Sue is an attending physician at the Department of Pediatrics in the Division of Oncology at the Children's Hospital in Philadelphia, an associate professor of pediatrics at the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine, and an expert in the diagnosis, treatment, and biology of acute lymphoblastic leukemia. So Sue, welcome. Dalembert, in addition to being a dear friend now of me and Madelyn James Foundation, thank you for helping us navigate research and equity, especially during these times right now. He is an attending physician in the Division of General Pediatrics at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and assistant professor of clinical pediatrics at the Perelman School of Medicine at the University of Pennsylvania. His academic research areas and interests are grounded in a passion for advancing health equity and include adolescent health and increasing patient family engagement with primary care setting. So thank you for being here. George Eastwood, in addition to being a mentor for me and a role model to the Maddie James team, he is the executive director of the Whitehead Foundation. And their foundation's mission is to help support the development of cancer treatments that are less toxic and have fewer long-term negative side effects for children. And we've witnessed that firsthand because Maddie had ART, which is one of those treatments that they really focus on. Our goal is to raise funds to support further research and make it possible for kids all over the world to have access to these life-saving therapies. So thank you, welcome. And Tahjhira Jackson, in addition to being a family member of the Madelyn James family and the first graduate of our program, Taj is an expert parent advocate. The way that she navigated her son's Zane's treatment was truly remarkable. She has a lived experience of navigating the barriers in pediatric cancer care, and I'm so grateful for you being here today. Let's get honest.
Well, let's get started. How about Dr. Sue?
I'll take a day.
As we know, funding is one of the biggest challenges facing finding a cure for childhood cancer. What are you most worried about when it comes to funding research?
We in childhood cancer are part of the children's oncology. So over 220 children's hospitals across the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and now even expanding into some South and Central American countries, run clinical trials for almost every type of childhood cancer imaginable. Most of these trials are for the newly diagnosed children to improve their cure rates or decrease their toxicities from their therapy. But a lot are newer therapies, relapsed children's indications, where that's great for everybody with adult lung cancer, but we want this for kids. Every 6 years, the cancer consortiums in the country have to apply for a grant, and these grants are millions, $250,000 grants that fund about 60% of the cost of running these trials with thousands of children every year in this consortium. Well, February is when it was due. The grant sadly had to be modified with some of the aims and the proposals coming out for diversity and equity. But it was submitted with those modifications in February, and usually the FDA, the government looks at it by the summer and begins to do the feedback on what they want modified, etc. They postponed that till October, so it hasn't even been looked at since they've had it since February. And in October, if they review it or not, if they don't give us any more money, we have no money as of February of 2026. And these are the trials that treat children everywhere. And if that doesn't get approved, even if we get 50% the federal funding we did have, or if that funding comes late, there are populations of children that will no longer get therapy on trials to try to improve it. So they can still go to their local hospital, but 5 years from now, they're going to continue to get the therapy that's 5 years old. That we won't be able to ask these really important questions for better cure rates and less long-term toxicity. So I think all the members of this consortium, which as I said, is every children's hospital, is getting really nervous. And with the equity and access issue, that if a child is in Kansas, if that trial isn't open there, but maybe CHOP has the funding to open that trial, or Dana-Farber, or a place in Florida, that leaves the burden again to the families in Kansas to get the best therapy somewhere else in the country. So it plays in to the whole equity and access issue as well. But that is probably the number one worry I think we all have.
Thank you, Dr. Sue. Well, on to Dr. George, where do you see access gaps? From your perspective at CHOP, what are the most urgent equity gaps in childhood cancer research with there?
So I approach this from and like thinking about equity and we incorporate it into our systems overall. And I think that it's important, especially these days, to understand what we're talking about. I think it gets bundled into a lot of things. And overall, maybe it feels like not strong enough, like an evil to be talking about. But sometimes that really is grounded in what you have to understand. So to have a shared definition, yes. Equity means that what they need to be away from. That is what it means. So if we stop talking about it as one word and walk up to the Caucasian person, people like, hey, you think kids should have the things to try? He's like, one, what are you talking to? But two, like, yeah, that sounds generally good. And I think that that's something that we actually agree on, that we should try to think of what we do to be first one. So when we apply that specifically to cancer, pediatric cancer, it get manifested. It manifests like throughout the spectrum of care. And I think it's important to realize that equity isn't charity, it's a strategy. Strategy to be able to achieve the best outcomes. And then if you achieve those best outcomes, there's actually spillover effects. Like you improve things not just for the child, you improve things for their family. You improve things for the system overall. As people are staying at work, staying in school, being able to see some of the economic benefits for the people who are really focused on kind of like the income piece of it. Just to see that some of the perspective of it's not even just about the child in front of the child. So what are some of those factors? I think there's things like making sure that people have access to the kind of the cutting edge therapies, a lot of which we are able to go through, and thinking proactively about what it looks like to increase awareness of those, but then to also be able to affect some of what might get the making it clear such behavior. But even if it can work out in the having a place to stay, thinking about the stresses that are put onto those families and what additional resources they might need to be able to make it through as a primary like social care for that child who's receiving it. These are more upstream as we think about this research, and because I imagine some of what was an issue in the application before, we need to think about like what is a treatment that we design? Have we done that in a way that takes into consideration a broad population so that you know that the treatment that you say is going to work will work for populations of kids that are varied and not just limited to those who happen to be lucky enough to be in the place that have the resources to be in the trials that we put together. And so whether it's thinking upstream about how we develop the therapies or thinking downstream about how we deliver those therapies, holistically thinking about consent rate, how do we help children thrive is how we really incorporate equity.
Thank you very much. I think that's incredible to look at it as a strategy, not charity. That's thank you so much for that. To the other George. Advanced therapies like CAR are changing outcomes, but 80% of eligible patients don't access. What barriers are driving this?
Yeah, the George for starting with definition is always key. We think about Emily's story, who many of you know. We've also Emily's doctor and about this early treatment. At the foundation, we tend to look at it. It doesn't always need to be a sad story. Many to drive effort forward. You can't just raise funds with fear. So we believe in hope, innovation, access. But I think all of those words could use a proper definition the way that George looked at it, because we just hear them thrown out. What access means, it's almost, and I love the part, it's almost a negative word. Especially in the current political climate, access equity, we don't want to talk about them, we don't want to hold them apart. I think that's something that we're looking at with even 8 years post-approval, families treatment with Tahjhira, 80% of eligible people aren't getting it. We often group this into a giant statement of community access, which we give me the definition of both community and access. We know that rural communities are one. We also know that disadvantaged populations in big cities that have unbelievable centers down the street are other parts of it. So the way we're looking at it as a foundation as we grow our mission and get involved in policies, how do you detangle enough to be able to take that 80 number and what would it mean to turn it to 79? Even 1% of more eligible patients receiving treatment. It's actually not that easy. We can do a bunch of things, but you can start that number to say if we're going to do X and X, we could get that number down to 70. It's not really great answer, but there's certain things that we can work on. The REMS requirement being reduced, the clinicians in the community, are well advanced than you would believe, because that innovation's been around for 20 years here in Pennsylvania and Philly. So doctors at the med school were following these stories, and they're back in their community ready to deliver, but we still don't have an idea of how it affects those numbers. So we've been attacking some of those little barriers that you don't even hear about, right? It's the long-term follow-up requirements and the other piece that we can address them on the policy side for loosen the burden, but we need to follow through and make sure it's actually realized. Because if we do a lot of these smaller changes, free up things that point to access, how do we know that they actually were enacted? If the infrastructure is not there and the connection of all of our stories aren't together. So I think every single thing Sue and George talked about are barriers. Then there are these barriers even for commercially approved drugs. In a perfect world, we like to think if we look at those that fail, we could, as Reagan trickle down economics and cure all children for free. That's not going to happen that way, but if we deliver or even start developing some specifically for children that can get commercial approvals, they can even have access to that problem of not delivering. So we're working to map that out, to bring groups together, partner with all of their nonprofits to address this, and even just building the proper terminology is probably the start. George's idea of doing that, I think we could all get together and start defining these things as it relates to pediatric cancer or rare disease or advanced treatments that require these specific payment models that are drastically different than how the US healthcare system operates. When we have the cures almost too fast to innovate to actually provide equity and access. So, lots to do.
It was a lot. And I think one of the things that we shared as we were talking, George, was like this theory, the working together part and like the hope that we see in being able to be partners and work together in this broad community of like all nonprofits and all systems together to bring hope. And I think that was one thing, like hope is so important, as we all know. And I think it's, for me and Dan, we always brought hope with us no matter what happened. It was like finding those small little nuggets of joy along the way. And I think that's what we're doing. It's like we're just sharing these little nuggets that will eventually, hopefully, build up from there. So I appreciate all of yours. And so over to Taj. So, you have this lived family experience of working with us and also going through childhood cancer for your incredible son, Zane, who's about the same age as Hannah. And so, one of the things I would love to know from you is just kind of how did you better navigate access to treatment? Did you always feel like you had the best access to treatment and treatment options? And, what did you learn along the way?
I do feel like we had great access to treatment. However, I feel like the Madelyn James Foundation helped us navigate that better. In the beginning, I feel like we were placed in a box, and it was like a lot of gray. We didn't know what to do, where to go, but early on, we got introduced to Jack and Dan. Thank you guys so much. And you kind of opened these backs for us. You showed up, immediately, you guys opened up your doors with open arms. And just made the process easier. We didn't have anyone. We didn't know anyone that was going through what we went through, or what we were going through at the time. So it really just helped us navigate everything. You guys were advocates for us. You provided resources. If you didn't have an answer for us, you guys was on board and kind of had conversations outside of us, and came back with those answers, which truly helped. So between the foundation and our great support system at CHOP and our doctors, I do feel like we were able to navigate overall the best way possible.
And so from your opinion, how do you, what would you say to reshape a system to make it work better? What are your thoughts on that?
I think, tell the parents that it is okay to speak and to ask questions. No question is a wrong question. Or I would like to say, people would say, oh, that's a stupid question, dumb question. Just use your voice. I was told by these doctors, a lot of times like they would apologize for not sharing the small details and tell me, we just don't have parents ask these small questions anymore. They kind of just get treatment in and kind of just go with the flow. So I found constantly, I've always sent them back to the drawing board, sent them back to other doctors, asking if we went one way or another, what would be the outcome. Just constantly asking questions. So I would really say, ask the questions, no question is too small or too big. Even if it's a challenging question, even if the doctors don't know, I've learned that they'll try to give you the best answer that they can if you just ask. I think a lot of parents shut down and just feel with emotion and don't speak up. And you kind of lose if you don't ask these questions. So
That's really hard too, like in the moment, right? Like how do you tackle this? I remember when Maddie was first diagnosed, it was like this new language we all had to learn and like this new set of skills. Like no matter where you come from, like that's just how it is. Like you're just now I'm in it. Like, oh, I have to learn all this medical stuff. And then by the end, I remember going to Sue and just being like, so what do you think of my theory, Sue? Right? Like and so I think that's one thing that I so appreciate about like at least our personal experience and what you said, like being at shop and also being with people who listen to your opinion as well, which makes such a big difference, no matter kind of how you're tackling it from like the top down, from the systematic, like the system perspective or individual. It's like, you know, people, we just want to be heard and seen, right?
we're a team. I know thing, and they know the medical aspects. So together we beat it. But I feel like if you let one in or the other, you might not have the best outcome. It's
Where is Zane? What is he doing right now?
he's with dad. Playing, relaxing, he had a long day. He's in his last year of pre-K, so that's exciting. We actually beat treatment right when pre-K started, or back in treatment, and rung the bell right when pre-K started, so that was exciting. Didn't miss that aspect, like,
Just amazing. Awesome.
And so follow to our panelists, how can systems be reshaped so no family has to face those barriers alone? A big chuckle from this.
Can we rebuild the entire care system of the states? I think individual hospitals do everything they can. But I think people forget that like insurance doesn't pay for social workers. Insurance doesn't pay for authorization specialists, single case agreement specialists. That all comes out of hospital running budget. They don't pay for child life. You don't get billed, and that helps for your tic-tac-toe or bingo game. And so that is all stuff a hospital does, and they do it to the extent they can. We're lucky here in Philadelphia. CHOP is very well supported by the community, and families and foundations support all different aspects of this care. But some of the smaller children's hospitals don't have that. And therefore, that means the patients at those hospitals have no one fighting for them to get them in a clinical trial of different hospital, to copy records and get to do all the things that would be necessary to really find, a more specific trial. Another big area in the kind of the access is insurance, because people think Medicaid is Medicaid, but New Jersey Medicaid is very different than Pennsylvania's Medicaid program. Nothing personal. If you have a sick kid, you'd much rather live in Pennsylvania because the CHIP program in Pennsylvania is like a secondary insurance. Even if you have private insurance, it's a secondary insurance. In New Jersey Medicaid, it's not like there is, you get your prescriptions covered, but there's very little else. And children who live over in New Jersey, they can live closer to the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia than any hospital in New Jersey, but they can't come to CHOP. And so it seems like those barriers state to state, from hospital to hospital, it seems like investments could be made to level that playing field so that every child, no matter where they are in the United States, kind of gets the best coverage and the best care. Because in Pennsylvania, can fund it, why can't New Jersey? Why can't the government fund it? So I will pass it on to someone more expert in this.
So I think that there's improvements that come in that everyone will appreciate, but the question is about systems. I really think that this is a systems issue, we need to conceptualize it in that way. And every system is perfectly designed to get results. So systems perpetuate, so we need to disrupt the systems in really intentional ways if we're looking to change outcomes and big outcomes. I think that some of that's going to happen at the federal level. Some of it's going to happen like at the bedside. So thinking about like how do we build systems whereby the onus isn't on the parent, where I think like making sure that our parents feel like they can advocate. We should be actually doing that, but the onus shouldn't fall on the parent to fight all the odds and be able to raise their voice. And we need to, like, part of what I use, like, resident training. So like thinking about like, how do we empower our team members, whether it's the physicians or even the team, to be able to invite those, be able to make it feel like a space where people can ask and share the fears and the worries, and the thing that they read. And so like that's an example of things at the bedside. But then we also have to think about the systems upstream before something gets possible. So there's a phrase that's used, so social determinants of health or social drivers of health. Those are the conditions where people are born, grow, and work, etc. And a lot of those are what drive outcomes. And the estimate is like 80% of outcomes is based on social determinants of health, and like a often quoted study. And that's like not the healthcare piece. It's thinking about there's been research that's been done on this of like, how are you coming in? Are you coming in healthcare? Are you coming in a situation where you haven't been malnourished, or you have had food access, so that your body is in a position to be able to kind of like deal with the chemotherapy better. It's thinking about what are the social support structures and like what's the strain of the family in terms of the finances of all of this, that we can disengage more, and especially if you think about finances. The economic piece of things is that we call it the driver of the drivers. So when you think about equity, like it's the same like cash flows, everything around it, like that money part of things is tied to so many other pieces. The financial strength of hospitalizations in general, medical care in general, but especially cancer care can be significant outside of any hospital bill that you're getting just from just kind of like the spillover. So I think that as we're thinking about the system, we need to think the full spectrum at the bedside before they even get to the bedside, and thinking about those bigger systems in which we operate and how we change things at each of the levels. And realistically, we talk about innovation. There's incremental change, but then innovation is sometimes blowing things up. RT is a whole different way of thinking about addressing cancer. We need more of that, not just in terms of the therapeutics, but in terms of how it's possible.
Or did you want to say anything about that? I think it's like the perfect segue, talking more about like the innovation piece of all of this and how it like that has to happen at the same time as these things are hopefully changing a little bit, right?
Yeah, and I think hearing from both Sue and George's points, systems can be an overwhelming word. And say 10 years ago, if we were looking from the top down, state Medicare, I could not be sitting here now because I couldn't listen long enough. If this doesn't make sense, it would be a challenge of getting that patient from New Jersey to Philly. But if you look deeper into the patient side, in my journey from science and manufacturing closer to the patient, you start seeing why it exists and listening more. Maybe you can stay a bit longer to at least understand why it might be this way. So now I can maybe articulate why it shouldn't be this way. So from the top down, the Medicare side, Medicaid, you name it. We were in DC as part of the Alliance for Regenerative Medicine, lobbying for the Kids Access to Care Act, which is going to, it has bipartisan support. But if you look at the details, it's giving 3 years for each state to come up with a better system in which you can transfer Medicaid from state to state. That's, if it's approved today, it would be 4 years away from the requirement of coming up with a new system. So how long until we actually deliver on it? It still has to happen though, right? So that small nudge we're making in DC that day is one piece of a very large system, but it's one of those nudges that we need to hold accountable to solve some of the problems that Sue is talking about. Or we hope there's going to be 50 different states, right, with 50 different state agreements. But at least it's a federal level on down. And I think to George's point, and where our foundation gets involved a lot, I think the term we've been using is the privileged minority that fight their doctor that is kind of saying, yeah, that party thing, I don't know, 8 years post-approval, we'll get a call from an enterprising parent that says their doctor is kind of voodoo and they're not sure the scope of standard of treatment. But a lot of times they end up finding out from anywhere in the country or world, plus the power of Emily's story be out there. So there's like this social system that when you think about social determinants of health, it's usually educated people that have seen this story, that have dug deep in the internet, come across Emily's story, we connect to someone, connect them to us, and that we wish we could automate that with an app, but it is a people systems problem from where you're from. So it's the smallest level of who you know, who you call, how well can you research, how good is your mental health to fight through this, and that's a system of your community. To where George is pointing to this, most of what we can figure out is tell us what zip code you were born in, and we can basically tell you your likelihood of conquering each disease, before your mental health is like, if you have dental careers. It's life expectancy is a bigger term than anything else. But there's always an outlier and they always need to find a way. And if they can find it, how do we build a system so other people can find it? And you can tie into every policy, education, mental health, you name it. So where do you start tackling that? And you can do everything. We're trying to narrow our focus to empowering disease-specific foundations, moving more towards what are the main biggest problems in advanced therapies and innovation, and how do we break up what policy needs? There's FDA clinical, there's FDA manufacturing. Now, important to the patient, they know a lot about what devices they sell, but the world I came from, manufacturing innovation. When we bring a parent to a conference, they want to meet 5 companies that their daughter sells definitely pass through. Brian, our friend from the foundation, has seen that at many conferences where a parent will come and like introduce me to companies. We want to shake hands the manufacturer of the and it's a very unique power we have in advanced therapies to connect across the ecosystem. But if you have more systems to connect, so how do we get that together is the question that Jackie and I have been talking about. And I guess fortunately, unfortunately, it's getting together for a high level conversation and then doing something after, which 10 years ago, I would say, why do we just get together and talk all the time? Well, if we can lead with some action or one connection or one ask with everybody, maybe that's the least connection we got there.
I love that. And that's, wow, you really lined that up so well. Tahjhira, did you want to add anything to that? Great. And so, I wanted to leave room for some questions as well. So I do, if each of our panelists could just say, quickly, if you could just ask anyone in this room or anyone who's watching, and it'll be recorded too. So, to take one action, what would it be?
If one thing that we're speaking, of course, that resonated, but it can be overwhelming to think of how complex systems are. And at the end of the day, just the starts. So just like figure out what the thing is that is in your power, that is within your purview. There is something. And just start there. It's like, every long journey starts with one step, but whatever saying you want to use. But we can really get kind of like caught up and frozen. You can just end up how everything is. But if we just start, like we can start to make connections, start to really uncover the problem, start to refine definition, start to push back on some of the narratives, and together all the practice will.
Kind of going along with that conceptually is the pay it forward. Everybody in this room, unfortunately, is gonna have some kind of life altering event. Doesn't have to be medical. And you get through it. And 2 years later, you kind of are an expert at that point, or you understand it. And joining a group, being there, funding a group, being like for us, like parent advisors, like Blood Cancer United as like mentors. Thinking about now I've made it through this and what did I learn? Tahjhira learned to advocate. Tahjhira going back, paying it forward by going to a church group and saying, hey, hey, this is what you need to do when you're in medical issues. So taking that one event, that one night, that one step volunteering, that 1 hour to pay it forward so that the people who are coming along behind you can benefit from your knowledge or your willingness to raise money or your willingness for advocacy, I think would be a good first step.
Okay. I'll say to continue to speak up and share the knowledge, especially to us as parents going through it. I know there are some parents who, may want to shut down and not want to take in as much information as possible because it may be overbearing. But for some parents that are out there like me, the more I knew, no matter how small or big the information was, the better it helped me be prepared for what we were going to face. It made me more comfortable, more confident, especially when going into the rooms and talking to the doctors. So I think by just speaking up and sharing whatever you know, even if it's small, you think that it may not make a difference because it truly does.
I think it's leaving this event and saying, cures do exist. We're not so great at delivering them to everyone. And I think that alone, 90% of the general population, I'm not very fun when I'm at a party and people badmouth scientific research or there's a cure hidden somewhere. Because then we get into the systems discussion of, okay, so my great colleagues at CHOP and Demet are in the lab at 2 a.m. growing cells, or at Janssen, or this one assay, they're all doing this in vain. Really discounting that investors really smart people, they don't understand, you're not hiding them, they're actually out in the open. And I think that is eye-opening to many people either haven't been through it or haven't been a part of the ecosystem yet of science. And I think that's what leads to this conversation about, because listen to our doctor in our town, they know everything, and move on. I think we dream of these days when the doctor would come to your house and treat everything. But we didn't even diagnose 90%, didn't see this, that's why we have specialists, that's why we progress, it's a huge advancement. I think we can astrology look back, and it's at least that was that non-questioning, all-knowing piece that we can keep challenging, but there are amazing breakthroughs there. The foundation, we just try to share the events and miracles, which was treating Emily and Emily's story. And it sounds like a very simple part of our mission, and it's very hard to measure awareness. But every single person could say, there's these amazing stories, here's one. So Emily's is one, Maggie's is one, Paul's story will help. So we just had one group, but we could get to the one person that's complaining about us not doing enough. And person usually not doing enough too. So we could just work one person or outside. Or you could all quit your jobs, join a nonprofit. And sign up with Jackie. And after this, I get my college roommate. For a league ball in 2022, that was a couple of years. candidates happily easily, and, for the greater good, so we're constantly recruiting, or the volunteer a few hours for plans. So.
Yeah. Does anyone, do you have any questions that anyone wanted to ask?
Is it me? George, I really resonated with what you had said about the explanation of equity. And I think that's a lot of the times when I'm trying to get a message out to people on what I'm passionate about and what I care about and being involved in the Madelyn James Foundation. Can you give us that definition one more time? And if there's anybody else can think of a better way or a different way to explain something to really engage them.
So, I'll let these children having what we need to do in the past. One of the simplest ways that we got it, there's other ways that will reverse for a like possible form. And that means that the people out where there are differences in disparity, that you think about historical, most contemporary factors, all that's make the share. Because you put more broadly that hope out what it needs to be.
Thank you. Any other questions?
One other piece, I think, George, is what is the definition of thrive and how do we reframe that? It's a nice conversation. Is it another the boo-boo doll for our daughter? Or is it, teaching them to give back and ask, how can I help? Right? It's that definition of thriving can be varies across. So how do we define thriving? Especially when we reframe it in childhood cancer, people can get understand the big difference.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for really highlighting the equity and accessibility aspects of things. So my name is Morgan. I'm from Golden Home Care, which is in a unique position. We're working with the Medicaid systems and using that to employ caregivers or parents to help take care of these children. We're really in a, as I mentioned, a unique situation where we recognize that we're not doing great. And we kind of have the opportunity to build a different system that we sort of in our company. So I'm really focused on, of course, building our services, as well as education and community feedback. But I wanted to know from your perspective, is there any other areas that I should be talking to really make at least the caregiving, home health aides and even skilled nursing with services more available to families who need it?
I'm going to give you an example of something we came to discover. There's a new immune therapy off the shelf for we've proven that this is better. Huge, one of these big children's oncology group trials improved survival by 8 to 9%. Adults, it was probably 15%. You have to get this drug for 28 days as a continuous infusion. Let's think again about a 2-year-old getting a 28-day continuous infusion. Well, Madelyn James got the beautiful backpacks to make it more palatable for the kids. But what we discovered is that the state of New Jersey had no pediatric home care companies. They had adult home care companies, but they really did not have pediatric home care companies. And when the folks over in New Jersey got the list from the state of New Jersey and began to call these 20 companies that the state of New Jersey had on their rolls for home care companies and could go to the house and change the bag so the kids didn't have to every 4 days come back to the hospital or the clinic. One by one, oh no, we don't have any pediatric certified nurses working now. No, we don't. Like, it was just really shocking to see that there weren't the services available into the kids, at least central and southern New Jersey. I honestly don't, maybe over the bridge. And even if the state of New Jersey was willing to contract with Chalk Home Care is actually located in King of Prussia. They could not service kids who lived in Cape Ann on a regular basis. We don't we have to double the size of child home care, which you can't do, but finding something as simple as the lack of pediatric home care companies, which decrease costs. Kids don't have to be hospitalized for things. To give them the therapies was one small area that was eye to us. So,
I think one of the things I actually heard it today, called Employment Research Foundation. And we were doing our exploratory work on what support program should we build. It's what about those that don't have a caregiver, we'll build a program where you can run a caregiver. I'm like, okay, that's a bit difficult for our first program from scratch. But perhaps there's models where if it were available, certainly there's pharma companies we know that fund some of this, but it's the infrastructure of the existence of what does a caregiver look like. And someone in your role probably a very good view of that, more than, and we could, we get the call from those great structures. Nobody's calling, no longer don't have it. We've heard that pop up a bunch. It's so big, I wouldn't know where to tackle it. You might be better prepared.
I remember too, when we were going through everything, we started our journey in Virginia, and it was like during COVID. And so I feel like the one great thing that COVID gave us, which is a crazy thing to say, is that it broke down barriers. We were able to talk to Sue and get a second opinion on like just on our computer, which is not possible. And so it's kind of, when you answer that question too, I'm kind of like, oh, I remember they also said I could get paid as a caregiver to do this. Like I could get paid to do like caregiving for my child. And a lot of those programs closed after COVID too. So, you know, I feel like it gave us some sort of innovation during a time of need across the country. And so how can we like just a question that doesn't have to be answered, but just what can we learn from these situations that was good and then bring them forward in the future? I think we have terribly time for like one more question.
It's pressure. My name's David, and I'm a chaplain with the spiritual care team at SHOP. Thank you all for doing this, and Jackie, thank you for hosting it. Thanks for your perspectives on the work. And my question is broader scale, but Tahj, I would want to also just honor your lifting up the power of asking questions and speaking and listening. That's really important. But I'm actually going to ask a question about money, which is it seems that a lot of what you're talking about is rooted in systems that are governmental, funding and structure. And that's a really complicated time. I'm just wondering what you've seen or what might be possible in the world of private investment, impact investing, which is actually quite a kind of powerful movement going in Philadelphia. How can that kind of investment match the scale, the huge scale that we're seeing in government funding? And what have you seen about possibilities so that we aren't just dependent on maybe turgid or evaporated government structure for funding? I don't just want to chaplain the crash. You can do it. Yeah, you're fine. So I think that one of the kind of questions is kind of like private enterprise match the skill of and I think that your step, like when you can print money, it makes it easier to spend a lot.
Right.
And so I also think that's okay, because it doesn't mean that there's not opportunities and lots of opportunities for us to think about, private and public partnerships to really invest in areas where it really doesn't need to be shared. Like for so many of the elements that we think about, there is a return on investment, especially when you start to think about like the broader systems that are impacted by any medical need. And so there are arguments to be made outside of doing it is the right thing to do, to actually invest. And then you will get a return on that investment. And I think that, especially in cases where you're not constrained by like a business model, for example, the payers, they know that today's kids are tomorrow's adults, but tomorrow's adults are not necessarily their problem. Because they might switch from independence group cross the echelon to something else, and so they're worried about the members that they have right now. But maybe it frees you up to not be constrained about that if you take a different approach. And you can actually think about like, no, we're investing, and we know that we can get this person back into kindergarten. We can start to build that education, education pays like over the course of the lifetime, like this is actually a X% ROI. If you can start to think more broadly, I think it does open up doors to think about spending in different ways and know that you will get a return, even if you can't spend what, the NIH used to. Okay, that takes time for other people to come up with even smarter responses.
Well, it did make me realize something, because early in the CAR-T program at CHOP, part of the way it became feasible to get children from all over the country to CHOP was we had pharma partners who paid for travel, basically paid for everything but health. That appears on my own. But it leveled the playing field in a sense. You still had to be a family that found this out, and an oncologist who understood it. And CHOP had this program in place for, relapsed children coming for specific clinical trials. But, we had over 80 kids a year coming for CAR, so that quadrupled the number of kids coming in. So that was an example of non-federal funds paying for families. And yes, there were some kids and some insurance did cover part of it. Maybe they covered the flights, maybe they covered the housing. But we could level the playing field for every player out there because we had this massive fund that these families could take, and therefore they didn't have to worry at least about the flights, paying for the flights and a place to stay. They still had to worry about the other 3 children and, their jobs. But at least that was using kind of a pharma hospital partnership.
Yeah, coming from the startup side and for-profit world, I assume nonprofits would be the answer, but we're under-resourced, understaffed. And oftentimes, there doesn't exist a entity label that can follow this, but we do see, and maybe it's configured as public benefit corporations, where at least the investors are knowing they're not going to 20x their investment, so there's more of a horizon. So we're working with a new payer that is a public benefit corporation, venture funded by A16Z Venture Capital. That's a reinsurance for cell therapy. Basically take on a risk pool for cell therapy only. Because we see payers not covering CAR-T, specifically carving out CAR-T. It'll be in your Independence Blue Cross, there's everything but to get CAR-T treatment, which is not great for access. But when we see that happen, there's always an opportunity of private money that wants to do good that just needs to be directed. So I say even in the lack of NIH funding, we see a really smart philanthropist like Bill Gates. It's not a coincidence that I'm going to give away the money in 20 years. So maybe it does some of that in it. It's not a big deal, but perhaps it does allow for investors to say this is a new bigger problem and I know solving big problems. We need to draw attention to that and then show that long-term ROI to society, which only those for the world are in it for a downtown Baltimore student or somebody in Kenya. Not many people have a view of the entire human race's contribution over the next 100 years. So how do we find those people? And Jackie's good at that. So how do we find them and then show that ROI, whether it's in production value, intelligence, many ways we can go about that, but it's a little complicated.
Well, thank you all so much for being part of this panel. I hope everyone came away with this from a little bit more knowledge, just having this conversation, putting it out there. And then also, I hope that everyone feels like the hope that there's a lot going on in the world, and I believe that we all can play our individual part to do good. It doesn't where I stand, it doesn't matter if you have $1 billion or you have $1 to support an organization that you truly care about. It's about putting your passion forward. And so that's why I love working with other nonprofits like Emily Whitehead Foundation, which with so many others, because I think it's really about that collective impact that we can make and make a difference together. And we've seen that happen. Like it definitely does work. And so I hope, within this big systems conversation, that everyone leaves with like, I can do something. And that's what I really believe. And so we have a few things from Madelyn James too that I just had to share. First, can we just give a round of applause for our amazing. So a few requests, just follow us on social media. We have these little one-pagers. It is Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. We know that every day 47 children in the US are diagnosed with cancer. And so we ask you to give $47 to an organization of your choice. If it's Madelyn James from Whitehead Foundation, we would love that. And then just spread the word, like use your voice, raise your voice, and share what you've learned today with someone new. Or someone who maybe doesn't know as much about this world as we do. So I hope that everyone had fun. There's a lot of mac and cheese. Hopefully everyone used their drink ticket. Dan, you want to close us out with our favorite thing today?
Well, at Madelyn James, Maddie's favorite book was Top on a Fish. And so
I love that one.
from when we were the top fundraisers at the Shop Parkway Run to now, we end every Madelyn James event with the ending of the pop off. So if everyone, including everyone out in the internet, and, if you can repeat after me, I'm a kiss kiss fish.
With this kiss finish.
With the kiss kiss face.
With the kiss face.
We're spreading cheery cheeries
We're spreading cheers.
all over the place.
All over the place.
Smooch, smooch, smooch.
Smooch, smooch, smooch.
Thank you so much for being here. I know I'm ending this with a lot of hope to bring everyone together here and hopefully enjoy the mac and cheese and drink ticket, and thank you, Jackie, incredible work putting this all together.
And also the Catherine, our amazing event manager.
Thank you.
That's great.
So good. Yes. That's so cool.